books, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk about the Stella Prize. Now the Stella Prize is an Australian prize. I spoke about it in my previous video and I've been a little out of the loop with my reading, so I have read exactly, just looking at the list now, 0 of these books that are on the long list, which was announced about 10 days ago. So yet again, I'm coming late to the party, but that's okay. There hasn't been a great deal of Stella Prize videos on BookTube. Come on, Aussie YouTubers, BookTubers, please do some more videos about the Stella Prize. But the books that come out of the Stella Prize are phenomenal. It's probably the premier prize, literary prize in Australia. The Miles Franklin is the one that everyone seems to go on about, but I like the Stella Prize better. It is for women authors in Australia across any genre. So you can see poetry, fiction, non-fiction of any description. In fact, last year's winner was a poet. Previously, they've had memoir writers win the prize, non-fiction writers, fiction writers, all over the shop. The books that come out of here are amazing, and you'll always find stuff on the list that you've never seen before. So I'm going to follow a format that I saw Greg from Supposedly Fun do for the Women's Prize for Fiction. And there he went through the long list for the Women's Prize and basically read out the blurb from the internet and then decided whether it was on his keep list or not, whether he wanted to read it or not. So there's really no judgments here. He certainly had an opinion about what he thought would win from the 12. So I'm going to follow Greg's format. I think it's a fantastic format. Because I'm not making any huge sweeping judgments, and it doesn't rely on me having read all of these books that are on the long list. I am going to make my way through them as best I can. I'm certainly not going to get through all of the long list, I don't think. But let's go. I'm going to do these in order as they're seen on the website. I've got a couple of them in person, but pretty much everything else is going to come from the library or from my local bookshop. The first is one that I have picked up from the library, and that is The Furies by Mandy Beaumont. And the cover looks lovely. It's from the library. I'm about to start reading this. I've got 2 from the library, one of which I've already started to read. This I'm going to pick up as soon as I have a spot. On the internet, it says, Cynthia is just about to turn 16 when the unthinkable happens. Her mother was taken away by the police and her father left without a word 3 months later. After that night, Cynthia began to walk in slow circles outside the family home, looking for traces of her sister Mallory. She's sure that she must be somewhere else now, wherever that is. Cynthia knows that she doesn't belong here. Her mother never belonged here either. This is the place of violence, despair, the long dry, blood caked under the nails, desperate men, long silences. The place where mothers go mad in locked bedrooms, where women like Cynthia imagine better futures. As a threatening wind begins to dry whirl around her, seldom seen black clouds form above, roll over the golden brown land. Is that Mallory she can hear in the growling mass, in the harsh drought-stricken landscape of outback Australia? A woman can be lost in so many ways. The question is, will Cynthia be one of them? That sounds great, like a literary mystery, I guess you would put it. Very much an extension from just a plain old crime or plain old mystery, but into literary fiction. But that sounds really good. It is definitely on my keep list. It's one of the reasons why I picked it up at the library, because I'd read a short blurb, much shorter than that one. It sounded interesting, and I've never read anything of Mandy Beaumont before. So that is definitely on my keeper list. That sounds really good. And I'm intrigued, as I said in my previous video, I'm intrigued by stories where the people that you're supposed to trust, so mum and dad and brothers and sisters, completely abandon you and all that trust is gone. I'm interested in stories like that because I think it's an interesting dynamic where you put people in those positions where all the trust they had in and all the love they had for someone is just gone. I think it makes for an interesting dynamic in a book. Definitely a keeper. The second on the list is called Every Version of You by Grace Chan. Now, I'll read this one out as well. and I hadn't heard of this one at all before I saw it on the long list, so it was completely new to me. Mandy Beaumont had heard a little bit about, simply because it's slender connection to mystery, but here is the description. Every version of you, Grace Chan. In late 21st century Australia, Tao Yi and her partner Naven spend most of their time inside a hyper-immersive, hyper-consumerist virtual reality called Gaia. They log on, go to work, socialise and even eat in this digital utopia. Meanwhile, their ageing bodies lie suspended in pods inside cramped apartments. Good Lord. Across the city, in the abandoned real world, Tao Yi's mother remains stubbornly offline, preferring instead to indulge in memories of her life in Malaysia. When a new technology is developed to permanently upload a human brain to Gaia, Tao Yi must decide what is most important, a digital future or an authentic past. Never Let Me Go meets Black Mirror with a dash of Murakami surrealism thrown in. This is speculative literary fiction at its best. And it does sound fantastic. I do like these impossible futures type of thing, or almost near future. Like, you can see connections to what's happening now, and you can posit this futuristic world for yourself because we're getting closer to it every day. That stuff really interests me. So again, this one is a keeper for me. I think they've got it at the library, so I might put in a reservation for it, and I'll just read it when it comes up. But hyper-immersive, hyper-consumerist virtual reality, that sort of thing's been done before, but I think this has got a nice little twist. Bodies lie in pods inside cramped apartments. Yeah, it all seems pretty fantastic. Yeah, that's a go for me. I'm all for this one. So that was Grace Chan, Every Version of You. Let's go to the third one. The third one is called We Come With This Place by Deborah Dank. We Come With This Place. This is the first in the list of non-fiction. We Come With This Place is a remarkable book, as rich, varied and surprising as the vast landscape in which it is set. Deborah Dank has created an extraordinary mosaic of vivid episodes that move about in time and place to tell an unforgettable story of country and people. There is great pain in these pages and anger at injustice, but also great love in marriage and in family and for the land. Dank faces head-on the ingrained racism born of brutal practice and harsh legislation that lies always under the skin of Australia. The racism that calls a little Aboriginal girl names and beats and rapes and disenfranchises the generations before hers. She describes sudden terrible violence between races and sometimes at home. But overwhelmingly, this is a book about strong, beloved parents and grandparents guiding and teaching their children and grandchildren what country means, about joyful gatherings and the pleasures of eating food provided by the place that nourishes them, both spiritually and physically. Again, sounds really good. I'm not sure if it's something I would like to read. This seems different. I've read fiction that covers these topics in very hyper-realistic ways, and I've read non-fiction, which is more like an autobiography or biography of famous people or near famous people that are speaking of similar experiences. What I haven't seen, and I think where Dank is different, what I haven't read before is non-fiction. It sounds very much like memoir, where she's talking about her own experience of racism and growing up Indigenous, and then goes back into history to connect that to country. I haven't specifically read something like that before, which is probably what's keeping me interested, but I have read a lot about these topics already, so I'm a bit on the fence about this one. I'll let you know if I'm going to read it. I might wait to see if it gets through to the shortlist. So that was Deborah Dank, We Come With This Place. Next on the list, we have Eloise Grill's Big Beautiful Female Theory. And that's such an amazing title, Big Beautiful Female Theory. It's described as a graphic memoir, so a mix between memoir and graphic novel, which immediately makes me think, I'm really not sure. So let's have a listen. Part feminist manifesto, part comic book. Big Beautiful Female Theory is a carnivalesque exploration of the ways identity is formed through culture, relationships, and the weight of society's expectations. Without falling into a simple recovery narrative, these essays also resonate with humour, offering a sense of delight and optimism in defiance of difficult circumstances and unfair patriarchal structures. With breathtaking honesty and fierce wit, Eloise Grills turns her life, her body, and her mind into art, confronting what it means to grow up in an increasingly unfathomable world. Yes, again, it seems similar to Deborah Dan. I think I've read a lot on this topic already, either from people who are on the fringes of celebrity, or ex-politicians, or commentators and journalists writing about similar things. What I haven't read, because that was more linear memoir, where I was born here and now I'm here and everything that happened in between. What this seems to be more like is memoir and essays, which essays really do interest me. So again, on the fence, gonna wait for the shortlist, but memoir through essay is keeping me on the fence rather than on the other side. But it still sounds really good. So I'm 4 for 4 yes at the moment, unless you count On the Fence as 2 and 2. I don't know. Let's see. So 4 pretty good opening books here. Number 5 is our first jab at poetry, and it's by Sarah Holland Batt, and it's called The Jaguar. Sarah Holland Batt, The Jaguar. And with electrifying boldness, Sarah Holland Batt confronts what it means to be mortal in an astonishing and deeply humane portrait of a father's Parkinson's disease and a daughter forged by grief. Opening and closing with startling elegies set in the charged moments before and after a death, and fearlessly probing the body's animal endurance, appetites and metamorphoses, The Jaguar is marked by Holland Batt's lyric intensity and linguistic mastery, along with a stark new clarity of voice. Here, Holland Batt is at her most exacting and uncompromising. These ferociously intelligent, insistent poems refuse to look away and challenge us to view ruthless witness as a form of love. I read a fair bit of poetry for last year when for my master's thesis, including the winner of last year's Stella Prize, which was Evelyn Aralewin's Drop Bear, which was amazing, by the way. I don't think this particular volume of poetry is the stuff that I would normally pick up, especially the father-daughter relationship and the Parkinson's disease, although it would be harrowing to read about. I think in a poetry format, I don't think it's for me. So I'm going to say no to that one and move on. Still sounds interesting though. Maybe that's for you. I'd love to hear what you think about that one. Let's go with the very next one. This is back to fiction now. It's by Adrienne Howell, and it's called Hydra. Anya is a young, ambitious antiquarian, passionate about the clean and balanced lines of mid-century furniture. She is intent on classifying objects based on emotional response, and when her career goes awry, Anya finds herself adrift. Like a close friend, she confesses her intimacies and rage to us with candour, tenderness and humour. Cast out from the world of antiques, she stumbles upon a beachside cottage that the neighbouring naval base is offering for a 100-year lease. The property is derelict, isolated and surrounded by scrub, and despite or because of this, its wildness and solitude, Anya uses the last of the inheritance from her mother to lease the property. Yet a presence, human, ghost or other, seemingly inhabits the grounds. Hydra is a novel of dark suspense and mental disquiet, struck through with black humour. Adrian Howell beguilingly explores notions of moral culpability, revenge, memory and narrative, and through the female lens of freedom and constraint. It didn't grab me in the first paragraph about a young antiquarian who gets out of the antiques business. I thought, oh my God, how dreary. But now that she buys a property in the middle of nowhere and there's a ghost, possibly you've got me interested. Maybe I'm back in the game with that one. Other people who read that might think the other way round. The first paragraph might be going, oh yeah, I could go a bit of mid-century antiquarian stuff, and then, oh no, not mystery, suspense and ghosts, I'm out. But I'm exactly the opposite. So I think I'm in with this one. This one, surprisingly, Adrian Howell's Hydra. Never seen it on the shelves before. Never heard of it before this week, before the Longlist came out. So we'll see if I can find it somewhere, and I'll let you know. We're now back to non-fiction, and more like a biography for this one, I think. Nairi Jarrow and Jackie Huggins are the authors, and the name of the book is called Jack of Hearts. And let's have a read of the book. Born an only child in North Queensland, Jackie Huggins had an idyllic childhood in Ayr, where his family somehow escaped the harsh Queensland government's treatment of First Nations peoples. His father was in the army in World War One, and Jack followed in his footsteps into World War Two. He was captured by the Japanese in Singapore and spent much of the war on the notorious Burma-Thailand Railway. The narrative and personal reflections in Jack of Hearts give insight into love, loss, and the need to understand one man's journey, as seen through the eyes of his children seeking to learn more. It's an affectionate portrait and a moving account of courage in wartime, which helps a reader understand the sacrifices made by our soldiers. This does not interest me in the slightest. I apologise. I think there's been so much written about prisoners of war on the Burma Railway, on the Burma-Thailand Railway. There's been so much written, especially about the Australian experience there. The only point of difference here is that the family are Indigenous, but nothing in the blurb about the book, apart from telling us that they're Indigenous, tells us how you're approaching this story that makes your heritage an important part of that story. And so I don't know if they're dealing with this particular story of the Burma-Thailand Railway in a different way than any other book that's dealt with this story. So for me, it sounds the same as so many other retellings of prisoners of war in World War II, so I'll pass on that one. I would love to hear what you think. Next, Tracy Lee, All That's Left Unsaid. This one I've seen on Scribd for a while now, and I think I've liked it and saved it. Not that I've read it yet, as I've read 0 of these books. But we're back to fiction. So, about the book, just let him go. Those are the words Kai Tran will never regret. The words she spoke when her parents called to ask if they should let her younger brother Denny out to celebrate his high school graduation. That night in 1996, Denny, optimistic, guileless, brilliant, is brutally murdered inside a busy restaurant in Cabramatta in Sydney. A Sydney suburb facing violent crime, an indifferent police force, and the worst heroin epidemic in Australian history. Returning home for the funeral, Kai learns that the police are stumped by her brother's case. Several people were at Lucky 8 restaurant when Denny died, but each of the bystanders claimed to have seen nothing. As an antidote to grief and guilt, Kai is determined to track down the witnesses herself. With each encounter, she peels away another layer of the place that shaped her and Denny, exposing the trauma and seeds of violence that were planted well before that fateful celebration dinner. By colonialism, by the war in Vietnam, and by the choices they've all made to survive. Again, I'm back in the mix with this one. It sounds like a really intelligently done mystery. Again, trying to solve the puzzle of her own brother's murder. So this instantly has me at a yes. So this is definitely a yes for me, and it's been sitting, as I said, on my list for so long. I think I really need to pick this up and do this. I've been dithering about this one for a long time, but now that I've read a little bit more about it, I think yes, I really have to do this one. So that is Tracy Lee, All That's Left Unsaid. We have 4 to go. The next one is one I'm reading right now, which is this, Indelible City by Louisa Lim. The subtitle of Dispossession and Defiance in Hong Kong. I'm reading this on audiobook, so I did get this from the library. I mentioned in my last thing, but a spot opened up in my audio listening, so this is going back to the library tomorrow unread, well before the due date. I'm not going to hold on to it. I'm happy to listen on an audiobook. So, about the book, the story of Hong Kong has been obscured by competing myths. To Britain, a barren rock with no appreciable history; to China, as part of Chinese soil from time immemorial that had at least returned to the ancestral fold. To its inhabitants, the city was a place of refuge and rebellion, whose own history was so little taught that they began myth-making their own past. When protests erupted in 2019 and were met with escalating suppression from Beijing, Louisa Lim, raised in Hong Kong as half Chinese, half English, and now a reporter who had covered the region for a decade, realised that she was uniquely positioned to unearth Hong Kong's untold stories. Lim's deeply researched and personal account is startling, casting new light on key moments: the British takeover in 1842, the negotiations over 1997 handback, and the future Beijing seeks to impose. Indelible City features guerrilla calligraphers, amateur historians, and archaeologists who aim to put Hong Kongers at the centre of their own story. It sounds thoroughly interesting because they're not just looking at 2019, but the history that got us to 2019. And in my little bit of reading, I've only just started this, in my little bit of reading so far, it's the story of these guerrilla calligraphers that when they did the handback in 1997, when Britain handed Hong Kong back to the Chinese, there was this period of years, a decade I think, where a man kept writing slogans all over buildings, all over Hong Kong in really sloppy Chinese characters, and he became known as the guerrilla calligrapher, and that story is one of the first ones told in the book. It seems really good. I think I'm on a winner here, and I'm happy to keep this on the list. I hope it does well. I don't read a lot of non-fiction, so for this to strike me as a concept I might like, and then to like it after half an hour, 45 minutes of listening, that's a good thing for me, because non-fiction, I'm easily distracted, to be perfectly honest. Okay, 3 to go. We have, and I also had this on my shelf unread, but now I get to read it because it's on the long list. Fiona Kelly McGregor's Iris, which is an amazing cover with the scratched out eyes and mouth. It's just frightening. We're back to fiction for this one though. In late 1932, Iris Webber arrives in Sydney looking for work, but it's the Great Depression and there are few jobs for women at the best of times. She makes her way as best she can, a scam here, a shoplift there, busking with an accordion, and she knows how to use a gun. When Iris meets young sex worker Maisie Matthews, everything changes. But what options are there in a world where even on the margins, queer desire is harshly punished? The only way forward is paved with violence. Whip-smart, fierce, a woman far ahead of her time, Iris navigates these mean streets with a growing awareness, not just of herself, but also of the system enclosing her. Narrow, corrupt, brutally prejudiced. Pardon me. Yet there is still pleasure, sometimes even transcendence, based on actual events, really. Narrated in gritty lyrical prose, Iris is a teeming social portrait of schemers, gangsters, good time girls and sly groggers, a vivid resurrection of a city buried in the sands of time. I am 100% in on that story. It's not mystery, it's just a great story, hopefully told well when I get in there, about growing up about the queer experience in early 20th century or Depression era 20th century Sydney and all of the violence and gangs and prejudice that went along with that. That sounds fascinating. And I was so surprised that it's based on actual events. But I'm sure if you go back into the past, you would find some seriously violent and horrible things. Iris by, I've got to find it again, Fiona Kelly McGregor. That sounds great. Two to go. Back to poetry for this one. I haven't seen it in shops anywhere. I think if I'm going to read it, I'm going to have to read it either online or buy it from somewhere. But it is back to poetry. The collection is called Decadence by an author called T. On. And it says, funny, clever and keenly observed, Decadence is a profound musing on literature and language that deftly skewers the would-be gatekeepers of verse. With her second collection, T. On has cemented herself as a vibrant, unique and captivating new voice in Australian poetry. She indulges in her love of language, assembling a unique erotics of word and punctuation, showcasing a poetry that is pure in being about itself, but also powerfully seductive. As the poet herself puts it, this is art laid bare, performing how language works as language, but also as a window onto those dark human mysteries of being and feeling. I'm out. That's not for me at all. I, again, apologise. But that one is definitely not for me. A book of literature about literature, or a book of poetry about poetry, does not really do it for me. Yes, I'm going to leave it at that. So that's the second last one. I'll say it again. If that sounded great for you, I would like to hear, or if you've already read it, I'd certainly like to hear from you. T. On Decadence Poetry Collection. Finally, the very last one, and wait till you see the cover of this thing. It's called Bad Art Mother by Edwina Preston. And we're back to fiction for this one. Bad Art Mother. Good mothers are expected to be selfless. Artists are seen as selfish. So what does this mean for a mother with artistic ambitions? Enter frustrated poet Vida Gray, who is offered a Faustian bargain when a wealthy, childless couple, the Parishes, invite her to exchange her own young son, Owen, for time to write. What? Vader's story unfolds as an adult Owen reflects on his boyhood in the suburbs of Melbourne and in the vibrant bohemian inner-city art world where his restaurateur father was a king. Meanwhile, the talented women in his orbit, Vader, Mrs. Parish, the wife of an influential poet, muralist and restaurant worker, Rosa, push against gender expectations to be recognised as legitimate artists. But their intimates and the wider world almost Aunt Ornella, who declares herself without an artistic bone in her body, is perhaps the closest thing Owen has to a traditional mother. As Owen is encouraged to be a man, he loses something of himself too. Blending wit and pathos, love and fury, ambition and loss, this is an extraordinary novel of love and art set in the Melbourne milieu of Georges and Mercer Mora, Joy Hester and John and Sunday Reed. All of those people were just artists in this period. I think I'm on the fence with this one. At the beginning, the Faustian agreement to give up your child for time to write. As someone that's dabbled in writing, I think, do I? But obviously not. But then the rest of it seems to just be this. The word milieu is probably the best description. This melting pot of bohemian people in Melbourne in the 1950s maybe. So that kind of world interests me, but it doesn't give me enough of the story to get me in. So at the moment, I think I'm on the fence. I'm going to see if it gets through. I haven't seen it anywhere. The cover is incredible. But it sounds good. And that's it. That is, how many was that? 12 books in short measure. So that is the Stella Prize. For my way of thinking, the best literary prize in Australia. You heard it here first, folks. I would love to hear your comments if you've read any of these. I'd love to hear your comments if you think you would like some of these, or if you disagree with me. I'd love to hear from you as well. Please pick up any one of these pieces of Australian works, fiction, non-fiction, poetry, memoir. Please pick up any one of them that interests you and have a go at Australian writing. It is amazing, and it's different from everywhere else in the world. That's what makes it amazing, of course. I'll keep you up to date with the Stella Prize and how it goes and who wins and who gets through the shortlist, and we'll do another video just like this. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks. Bye.